Good evening, Facebook family and YouTube family. Welcome to another wonderful weekend, another wonderful Sunday evening session with Brian and Janice. Again, we are so delighted to have you join us this weekend as we begin to discuss another very interesting topic. And tonight we're going to talk to you about self-hatred. You know, we got so much going on in the world today, and I guess you hear that every day. It's beginning to sound mundane to me and to so many others. What we are now seeing is a really drastic amount of crime, gun violence. And we're going to talk about where a lot of this is coming from. Also, we're talking about just self-hatred amongst ourselves. You know, people, we don't love ourselves enough. We don't love each other enough. We don't love and support our youth and our young people enough. So we're going to dive deep into this topic, and I want you to share this video with as many people as you can. It's very important that we understand the value of self-love. And we take it so for granted. We tell everybody, I hear it so much, I love you, I love you, I love you. You know, it's getting to be so repetitious. Don't you agree, Brian?
I do.
People are just saying, I love you, and not even conscious of what they're saying. They're just saying it. It's almost like a recording, you know. So there's no really emotions attached to it. There's no seriousness attached to it. People are not thinking. They're just saying, I love you, because that's what we do. That's what we say. That's what is expected of us to say. But do we really understand true self-love? Take it away, Brian.
Okay, well, good evening, Facebook family. Good evening, YouTube family. As Janice said, we're going to be discussing tonight a serious subject as it relates to self-hatred in the African-American community. When we talk about self-hatred, what does that term mean? What does that phrase mean? Self-hatred. We know the counterpart to self-hatred is self-love. And like Janice said, the word love now is used so faddishly and loosely, she's correct, that it really has no significant meaning to it anymore. It's become a term of endurance just as relates to, it's a popular thing to say, right?
Yes.
So we're going to be talking about that as well. But what I want to do is, because self-hatred, you know, everybody has their own opinion as it relates to this. So, you know, this is always a sticky subject in the African-American community because it can be defined in so many ways. And everybody, like I said, you know, they're going to define it a little bit different based on experience, based on environment, based on different situations that they've actually gone through in their own life. It could be defined differently based on spiritual concepts, things of that nature. So when we talk about self-hatred, yes, it's vague in some aspects, but we need to define it amongst ourselves so that we'll know really what's happening in the African-American community. And I do believe that you are correct in saying that a lot of what we see as it relates to crime, as it relates to violence, is a indirect, you know, byproduct of self-hatred. Yes. Okay. So let's discuss that, but I want to do this. I don't want to just give you my historical concept. I want to share from a standpoint of a professional psychiatrist, professor emeritus that taught at Harvard University, African-American Dr. Alvin F. Poussaint. I want to just read to you his definition as it relates to this problem. And then we can go into a real good discussion about this. And those that are joining us by Facebook, we want you all to kind of engage in this discussion, ask some questions, make some comments, and hopefully before this show is over, we'll have a better conclusion of on what self-hatred is, and hopefully some solutions on how to deal with it within our community. Okay, so let me read this to you. This was written by Dr. Poussin in 1966. It was a study that he did as it relates to the Negro American and his self-image in integration. Okay, so this is what Dr. Poussin said. He says, most psychiatrists and psychologists would agree that the Negro American suffers from a marred self-image of varying degree, which critically affects his entire psychological being. It is a well-documented fact that this negative self-concept leads to self-destructive attitudes and behavior that hinder the Negro struggle toward full equality in American life. Okay, you can stop me at any time you have a question. He goes on and he says, a few groups have described integration as a deceit used in order to achieve a goal for white supremacy, always involving only a token number of Negroes integrated into white institutions on the white man's terms. They believe that integration as presently conceived and practiced in America will lead eventually to a greater crisis in identity for the mass of American Negroes, especially the poor, unless there are countermeasures. Therefore, some have advocated Black consciousness and different forms of racial solidarity as the way to the Negro's eventual psychological salvation and dignity. So let's stop right there.
We've been conditioned.
Okay, that's basically what he is saying. He's saying that as a Negro, like Janice says, we have been conditioned mentally to accept that we are an inferior species.
Yes.
And that we are an inferior being in this creation and in this experiment called America. Okay? So he prefaced that by saying that many psychiatrists as well as psychologists through many studies have found this to be a true statement relating to how the Negro sees himself. And based on the way the Negro sees himself, his behavior is reflected based on how he sees himself. His behavior is actually not only reflected, but projected, not only to others around him,
but to himself.
But to himself, that's right. And projected to white, black, it doesn't matter.
And you know, Brian, what is sad is that we don't realize it. Mm-hmm. You're doing this behavior, you have this behavior, and you don't recognize where it's coming from or where it came from. And mm-hmm. that is the problem, because we have not been taught. We have not had it in school. We don't know our Black history. We don't know anything about our history.
That's exactly right.
Understand the history of Black people, you got to go back.
Mm-hmm. And to understand self-hatred.
Self-hatred, you got to go back.
Of Black people.
Yes.
And when we say self-hatred of Black people, how the Black man and woman see themselves in this so-called American society. So when we talk about Black hatred, we're talking about how we see ourselves. Based on how we see ourselves is how we react to one another, right?
Right.
Okay,
right.
So you hit on a valuable point. You said we got to know our history. That is very important. And unfortunately, it is probably the least thing that's actually studied in our community.
It is.
Okay,
definitely.
so listen at this, Janice. This is what Dr. Poussin continues to write. He says, to understand the Negro's self-image, self-concept, and who am I, problems we must go back to the time of the birth and creation of the American Negro. Now listen at this. He said the birth and creation of the American Negro.
Right.
Okay. Not the African Black person.
Okay.
But the creation of the American Negro. So what Dr. Poussin is actually saying is that Black people that exist in America are a creation. They're an enigma. That's very powerful. So listen at what he says. He says, over 300 years ago, black men, women, and children were extracted from their native Africa, stripped bare, both psychologically and physically, and placed in an alien white land. They were to occupy the most degraded of human conditions, that of a slave, a piece of property, a non-person. For inhumane economic reasons, the Negro family was broken up and scattered from auction block to auction block all over America. The Negro male was completely emasculated, and the Negro woman systematically exploited and vilely degraded. The plantation system implanted a subservience and dependency in the psyche of the Negro that made him forever dependent upon the goodwill and paternalism of the white man. Okay, so Dr. Poussaint hit on something powerful. He said the damage that was done to the Negro psychologically, and not only that, physically, put in the minds of the Negro a dependency upon the white plantation owner, upon the suppressor, the oppressor, upon the slave master, that presently still exists with him even to this day.
Exactly.
So when we talk about dependency, one thing that the white American still throws in the face of the Negro is that you are lazy, you don't want to work, your women have babies and wait on welfare checks.
Depend on the system.
Okay, that's dependent on the system. So you want somebody to give you something. You don't want to work to better your community, to better your family. These are things that were put into us, he says, over 300 years ago.
Wow.
When we were brought to this creation, brought to this part of the planet that is called America. And he says the American Negro was created based off of the white man's ideology concerning who we were and who we were to be in this society. Okay? So we talk about the Great Society. What was the Great Society? The Great Society was a period in time when white people sought to advance themselves and to take advantage of a new system called capitalism within this country. You understand what I'm saying? That would allow them to have all of the royalties and the riches of the mother country, which was, at the time, we know the mother country was Great Britain.
Yes, it was.
Okay? So, when we look at that, how was black people included in the Great Society? Black people were included by being allowed to participate, but not being allowed to have the same equal advantages as the white, to not only better himself, but to gain those same royalties and those same riches. So the American Negro, the creation, the American Negro, has always been held at bay to some extent, has always been held to a certain class, okay, and held down to a certain point to where they cannot progress like the rest of society.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So is that understandable? Any questions on that?
You know, what I need for people to understand is that another thing that was embedded in us is that if you want to keep something from the African American people, put it in a book that they don't, because they're not going to read. That stigma is so profound, and it still stands today. There is so much knowledge out there that we can obtain by reading, not Google, but actually reading a book and getting your history. You can start with simple things. It is so important. It builds the self-esteem. It builds up the inner man to make you more.
So why was reading forbidden and prohibited by the white race as it relates to blacks?
Because reading is knowledge and knowledge is power.
Okay.
And they knew if we read, we could understand and we could teach our children and teach others, and we would come together and have strength in numbers.
So it's a way to better the community.
Yes.
So when you read, you can see through some of those vestiges that are intended to hold you down.
That's exactly right.
So we could read for ourselves and interpret
exactly
what is being said. So therefore, it was forbidden and prohibited, like you said, for us to read, because it was a form and still is. It's the greatest form of empowerment for our people. If we truly read and understand the history, we would not be in the shape that we're in today. If we consciously approached what we are as a community, what we are facing on a daily basis, if we understood why we are the way we are,
we could be better.
That comes from reading.
Read it, yes.
Okay. So let me finish reading this. What the brother said. This is what he says. He says, in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, the systematized racist and sometimes psychopathic propaganda of the white man, harrying about the inferiority of the Negro, increased in intensity. He was disenfranchised, terrorized, mutilated, and lynched. The Negro became every unacceptable, pernicious idea and impulse that the white man's psyche wished to project, i.e., the black man was animal with a violence to murder, ravaging sexual impulses, etc. The intensity of the white man's psychological need that the Negro be shaped in the image of this projected mental sickness was such as to inspire the whole system of organized discrimination, segregation, and exclusion of Negroes from society. The Caucasian American socialized the black man and black woman to internalize and believe all of the many vile things he said about them. They encouraged and rewarded behavior and attitudes in Negroes that substantiated their indicting stereotypes. Black men and women were happy-go-lucky, lazy, stupid, irresponsible, etc. Our mass media disseminated these images with vigor on radio, in movies, etc., and like unrelenting electric shocks, conditioned the mind of the Negro to say, yes, I am inferior. Okay, so let's talk about that. Our brothers and sisters, we have to realize at some point that the way we see each other and the way that we see those of the other persuasion has all been an experiment on black people in America. The experiment consisted of making the American Negro. Okay? So you have blacks that say, I'm not an African, I'm an American. They disassociate themselves from their lineage, from their heritage, and they only focus on what they have been created and designed to say. And that is, and part of that is the disassociation and the acceptance. Okay, the disassociation from liberty, from freedom, okay, and the acceptance of bondage, oppression, the acceptance of dependency. So we have been conditioned to disassociate ourselves from who we once were and who our ancestors were. Therefore, when you disassociate yourself, it doesn't matter how much you call yourself queen or king. If you disassociate yourself from your lineage, from your ancestors, king or queen just becomes a word.
A word.
It has no valid meaning.
No,
it is
exactly.
it is literally a fad. It is said with no response, because out of the same lips that call a woman a queen, and out of a man that calls a woman that calls a man king, in the next two sentences, they'll be calling them an N word or a B or a W.
Exactly.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Or an MF
Yeah.
out of the same mouth.
Yes.
Okay. So what does that show? That shows that there's a psychological disassociation with who they really are. And when they look at each other, they look at each other through the American creation of a Negro and what society says that we should be. And our behavior displays that.
Yes, it
so
does.
when we call each other out of each other's names, when we call each other the N word, we're really doing what society have created us to do and say.
Yes.
Okay? We're acting just like society created us to act.
Because
So
I do believe, Brian, if, this so-called woke culture, as they call it, is truly a sleep culture. They're asleep. Because they don't know the meaning of what they're actually doing and what they're saying. Because they have not read. It's just faddish to them. Even the locks, so much as the locks in their hairs, the piercings, the nose rings, all the piercings, the tattoos. Where did all that come from? And why did our ancestors do that?
Yeah.
We don't know. There's meaning behind everything that they did. They did nothing without a meaning.
So when we look at the African culture, yes, there were piercings in the African culture. We know that tattooing has been around since the beginning of time. That is not a new thing. Okay, it is a faddish thing, yes, but it is not a new thing. So piercings are not a new thing. What we have to understand, like you said, Janice, in context, what did our ancestors, when they pierced their bodies, what was the actual symbolism behind the piercing of the body?
Exactly.
Okay, so when you give you an example, the piercing, nose rings.
Yes.
Nose rings were used in the African culture symbolically to identify the union of a woman having been chosen by a man, okay, and two families having been receptive of that and agreeable with a daughter and a son coming together
as one,
and those two families uniting as one.
Yes.
That's in one particular culture in South Africa. When we look at nose piercing and we go back to the Maasai tribe in South Africa, okay, we can see the symbolism of nose piercing, what it actually means, what it was symbolic of. Okay, so what we do it as it relates to defining in America, as it relates to defining us culturally. Okay, so black people will pierce or tattoo themselves and say, okay, this is a new culture.
Yeah.
We're creating a new culture. This is black culture. When in essence it's not black culture. It is what has been projected upon blacks to say that this is your culture. And we have accepted what has been projected upon us. and we act upon that projection, and then we manifest it, okay, by doing what they say black culture should look like, sound like, be like, act like, okay? So when we talk with a certain, a certain tongue, or we the Bible talks about speaking in tongues. Mm-hmm. Well, our children been speaking in tongues for years. Okay, we've called it ebonics, we've called it slang, we've called it some of everything. You understand what I'm saying? But that has been defined as black culture. And we haphazardly have accepted that. So whatever this American society puts on us, unfortunately, we just kowtow to it.
Yes.
We pander to it.
Yes.
And then now this is how brothers and sisters act. This is what we do. This is our new culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we don't even realize
what we're doing.
Yes. And don't even realize that this is being shaped by the man. Yeah. There's some puppet strings being pulled here. Yeah. Okay. So let me go line. Good discussion. Good discussion, everybody. All right. So let me read his paragraph on the current situation. Now remember, this was written in 1966. Okay. Okay.
So Brian, make it clear that we're trying to bring everybody up to.
Well, we're helping them. This is relevant because it's just like he wrote it yesterday.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying? There's not any missing pieces that nobody, that people won't understand.
But I want you to understand where you're going with it.
They understand. We're talking about what?
What's relevant today.
Self-hatred.
Self-hatred.
Yeah. So This is what the paper is about. So now listen, this is the current situation. He wrote this in 1966. He said this was the current situation back then. Okay. It's still the current situation today. So let me read this. He says, most tragic, yet predictable, part of all of this is that the Negro has come to form his self-image and self-concept on the basis of what white racists have prescribed. Therefore, black men and women learn quickly to hate themselves and each other because they are Negroes. And paradoxically, some black men tend to distrust and hate each other more than their white oppressor. There is an abundance of evidence that racism has left almost irreparable scars on the psyche of Afro-Americans that burden them with an unrelenting, painful anxiety that drives the psyche to reach out for a sense of identity and self-esteem. Through contacts with institutionalized symbols of caste inferiority, such as schools, neighborhoods, etc., and more indirect negative indicators such as the reactions of his own family, he gradually becomes aware of the social and psychological implications of racial membership. He may see himself as an object of scorn and disparagement, unwanted by the white high caste society, and as a being unworthy of love and affection. Since there are few counterforces to this negative evaluation of himself, he develops conscious or unconscious feelings of inferiority, self-doubt, and self-hatred. Okay? Now, he wrote this and he said this was, at that time, was the current condition and situation of the American Negro, of the creation of the black African that exists in America. Okay? And it is still our present condition.
Yes, it is. Yes,
we still fight this same thing that he just expounded upon as it relates to the image and how the Negro conceives in his mind his own self, how he looks at, and the black woman, how she looks at herself. And he says that in some terms, in some ways, they respect and honor their oppressor over each other.
Definitely.
They love their oppressors over each other. So we have a problem. See, let me say this. I do not have a problem with white people that love white people. I think it's a beautiful thing. I don't have a problem with white people that stick up for their people's interests.
That's right.
That want to see the best for their community, the best for their children, the best for their women.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I do not have a problem with that.
No.
I have a problem with the Negroes that do not see their community in the same light.
Exactly.
And we will do anything to find something to criticize each other about. It doesn't matter how good that person is. It doesn't matter how bad that person is. In some Negroes' minds, that's been terribly brainwashed. Okay. In some Negroes' mind, they will love their enemies over loving their own family. And they will betray their family.
Yes, they will.
For the love of their enemies.
Yes.
That is deep psychological damage and trauma.
Yes, that's trauma.
That we just have to deal with.
Wow.
And understand that something is wrong in our community. So now, when we see young black men killing each other by the groves now, okay, nothing is more popular on the news now than blacks murdering each other.
That's it.
On a daily basis. Okay? Now, when whites murder each other, they have psychological
It's a mental
problems.
illness. It's a mental illness.
Mental illness to the point to where we won't even show the white person's face that murdered 3-4 blacks in a grocery store. You understand? Mm-hmm. And then shot up 11 more, 12 more, and some are in critical condition. You'll say the person's name and then post that there have been many speculations that this person suffered from severe
mental illness,
mental psychosis. But the same when it comes to our black men. We could do the same thing, and yet we become thugs, savages, gangsters,
criminals,
terrorists in our own neighborhood. So what we have to understand that the media projects onto us. The propaganda machine is at work to paint us in a certain light and to make us our image, make us appear to be really non-human, beast, if you will. Okay? And that's not only for the men, that's for the women too.
Yes.
The media, radio, television, movies want to paint our women as no more than B's and W's and hypersexual, materialistic, unruly, ungodly.
Yes.
You know, that's how they want our women to be painted. They don't want black women to be seen as responsible, loving, kind,
respectable,
nurturing, respectable,
upstanding,
human
good
beings.
Morals. Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
They want to make us into these, images that are deplorable to society and make us into something that is to be abhorred.
Basically, they're saying sex bunnies.
Well, yes, but they want to make the whole community something to be abhorred.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
We have to be careful when we're watching the news, when we're watching CNN, when we're watching Fox News, MSNBC, WSFA, WAKA. All of them are the same. They're owned by white media moguls that see the American Negro as their object of I guess you would say, object of shame. You understand what I'm saying? They make us the object of sedition and all the other things that you could think of. We're painted like that through media propaganda. So we have to be careful as African Americans not to buy into that. Okay? So, any questions on that?
No.
Okay, so let me read something else to you all. Okay? This is what he says. He says, "You hear our children shouting at each other in anger, dirty in, etc. Much of this negative self-image is passed to him directly," listen to what he says, "by parents who themselves have been conditioned by racism to hate their own blackness. And thus a vicious circle is perpetuated from generation to generation." I would say a vicious cycle.
It is a vicious cycle.
Okay. And he says sometimes this self-hatred can be quite subtle. Some black people may retreat into their own world and actually be more afraid of success than they are of failure, because too often failure has come to be what they know and expect. It is all too frequent that Negroes with ability, intelligence, and talent do not aspire to higher levels because they fear the responsibility that will be needed to handle success. Many African Americans tend to have lower aspirations and shy away from competition, particularly with white people. One study showed that even when Negroes were given objective evidence of their equal intellectual ability in an interracial situation, they typically continue to feel inadequate and react submissively. Okay. He says the Negroes communities, high rates of crimes, of violence, of illegitimacy, and broken homes can be traced in part to the Negroes' learned self-hatred as well as to poverty. Black crime rates are particularly elevated from crimes involving aggression, such as assault and homicide, and these acts are usually committed against other Negroes and for escapist deviations such as gambling, drug addictions, and alcoholism. Many Negroes are caught up in a vicious circle of self-destructive behavior as if to say to the world, yes, I am inferior and I hate myself for it.
Wow. Wow.
Now, this was written in 1966.
And we're seeing it today.
It is in full blossom.
Yes, it is. Yes,
it's in full bloom.
Yes. Yes.
Today.
Yes.
Okay. So we have to deal with this. We have to find a solution. Like you said when we started the show. How do we get back to a place of self-love? And truly, what is self-love? What does it mean to love oneself? Okay? We say that we are kings and queens, but when we look in the mirror, we don't see a king or queen.
We don't.
We say that we are the creator gods, and we are gods. But when we look in the mirror, we don't see gods. Because if we did, we wouldn't treat each other like devils. Yeah. Okay? And that is what portrayal also this society projected upon us as well. So they act like devils. That's why the association of black with evil and black with the devil is there. It is a creation of the American society to depict the Negro. Okay? So when people say, and you even hear parents say now, he's just a little devil. She's just a devil. They're already repeating what has been socially engineered into our minds hundreds of years ago.
Definitely.
In the creation of this experiment called the American Negro.
And you know, Brian,
okay?
you got to look at it in another form. And I've seen it as being the director of a psychiatric unit for years. I saw where met with kids when they had to meet with the psychiatrist and young adults where they were abused in the homes. The mother told them, you ain't nothing. You just like your daddy. You ain't gonna be nothing. Just like your daddy. You dumb. You stupid. You know, they hit them upside the heads. They beat on them. You know, they make these children feel so inferior. So these children are growing up in an environment where that is being embedded into them.
That's what he said, right? So that's what he's talking about. He's talking about the psychology as it relates to the vicious circle continuing and being passed down from parents.
It is.
Okay?
It is.
So we know there are all forms, like you said, and I agree with you. There are many facets because we all grow up in different environments, right?
Yes.
Okay? Some grow up in this creation called the ghetto. You understand? And in the ghetto has no mercy. Not nowadays. At one time, the ghetto was one of the most loving places you could actually be in. Now, when you talk about the ghettos has become synonymous with murder, gangs, and drugs. That's what the ghetto has become synonymous with. You understand what I'm saying? So when we look at, who we are as African Americans, we have to get back to some simple principles of defining ourselves, the way we define ourselves. What is a man? What is a woman? How should a child act? What is a child? You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
6-year-old child should not be cursing their mother or father out.
Right.
Okay. We gotta get back to the place where we value family. We value a man and a woman in a house together raising children.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying? So just some simple things. I know somebody will say, well, man, that is so old-fashioned, old school. No, we're talking about humane qualities. Humane qualities, respectable qualities that can end some of the foolishness that we are dealing with within our community. Okay? We got to stop accepting that the government is going to rectify our problems. The government has never rectified black people's problems. Matter of fact, the government has been the problem for black people because it is a form of oppression. It has always held black people down by way of the system. Okay? So some of the advances that we've seen as it relates to government has been because we had leaders that fought for those advancements. You understand what I'm saying?
It's a cycle. It's cyclical. You know, it's a cycle. How do you break that cycle?
Well, we talked about it. You don't break the cycle by continuing to do the same thing. So we always say, and you hear people, this has become faddish because people don't really believe it, but you hear people say all the time, how do you define insanity? By doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah. We've been doing the same thing over and over again for over 100 years now. You understand what I'm saying? And black people have become fearful. We've become so fearful that we will not denounce a Republican or a Democratic Party and say we're going to form our own black voters committee or voters union or even form our own party like Fannie Lou Hamer did in Mississippi when she and broke away and said, no, we're going to have our own committee and party to represent black people
in our interests. Yes.
And if we cannot represent our people at the table, we won't be a part of it. So see, we've become fearful to the point to where we feel like we have to take part in the creation of our oppressor as it relates to this America. Now, I will say this, black people, we know that there would be no America. America could not exist without black people.
That's exactly right.
You understand?
Yes.
Because when you look at, just from a standpoint of economics, black people economically contribute $13.1 trillion to the economy of America.
Every year.
This year, this past year, okay? It's up and down, but that's just an example. Now, when we go back in history, we know that this country was built by the hands of slaves. Nobody's ignorant of that. I mean, the person that don't study history know that. They may not know the details of it, you understand? But they do realize that there will be no America as we know it today apart from the labor of the slaves. That's just a fact.
Yes, yes.
Okay? And apart from the labor of African Americans, even after the institution of slavery, from a standpoint of being released and allowed to make this journey on our own. Okay, so we understand that. So and not to go through all of that, that history, but just we understand that portion, but we are missing, like I said, those principles to where we define ourselves. We cannot allow this society to continue to define us and expect to get better. Okay? There again, we can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over and think that we're going to progress. We may have hit the peak of our progression because for the last 10 years, you have not seen progression in the African American community that is of any significance. You may see some in the community progressing. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
You may see some in the community continuing to get ahead. You see athletes and entertainers, they're doing their thing.
Yes.
But for the majority of black people, we have hit a wall. Okay? And we're not progressing. We are actually regressing. You understand what I'm saying? And for those that say that they're progressing, and those that may still feel like they're moving forward and they're doing well, we possibly can associate that to them actually loving their white counterparts that they are in business with or work for more than they love themselves. Okay? That makes sense. And I'm just saying. Now, whether or not that's factual, it may be factual in some cases, but you can look at just from a standpoint of how this country works and what it takes to get ahead. Some will say, well, Brian, no, I worked hard. I got where I am because I worked hard. And yes, I do not discount hard work. I do not discount a person that go back to school, put themselves through school, climb the ladder on the job, all of those things. That is brilliant. I wish everybody could do that. You understand what I'm saying? And then some of us kiss butt, kiss butt, kiss butt until we get to where we want to be. Yeah. You understand? So you have two sides of the coin that are being played here. Okay, so we just have to admit that. But how do we, like I said, as far as loving ourselves again, I think part of loving ourselves is being able to make a commitment to each other, first we have to commit to ourselves, right?
Definitely.
We have to commit to ourselves to be better. We have to commit to ourselves to not buy into the stereotypes. You understand? We have to commit to ourselves not to buy into the creation of the American Negro and the labels that have been placed upon us. And we have to commit ourselves to turn around. This is individually. If I'm doing bad, I have to commit to myself that I'm going to turn the ship.
Yes.
Okay? So why do I say that? Because you cannot commit to your community that you're going to do good by your community until you could first do good by yourself. You understand what I'm saying? And a lot of people do not. So you talked about it in the beginning when you talked about self-love. A lot of people don't love themselves because they refuse to try to do what says, as it relates to committing to getting better, they refuse to do that. They refuse to say, I'm going to change. And what black folk do now, we talked about this on another show. We make excuses and then we'll say, well, don't you judge me. I can talk. We get an attitude. What Dr. Poussant talked about that. We get an attitude because we are looking for loopholes and alternatives for not doing better than what we are.
Right.
You know, yes. We look for those loopholes.
Yes.
And now as individuals, don't judge me. God didn't judge me. Well, God said he didn't judge you because he wanted you to judge you. Okay. So, you know, all of these, we look for ways
around
to get out of being responsible.
Yes.
To ourselves and to our community. You understand what I'm saying?
Definitely.
So if you look in the mirror and you doing bad to the person that's looking back at you in the mirror, you ain't gonna do no good for your community.
No, you're not.
That's just point blank. Okay. So when we look at the high crime rates amongst ourselves, our young men, even our young women, I was sharing this with Janet. You're seeing more gun violence with women now than you do men.
Just as much. Women are involved.
Yes, and they're shooting just like everybody else.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, and they're not shooting just handguns. They're shooting rifles like everybody else. They're shooting the AR-15s now.
They're involved in the robberies.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. They're involved in the drugs. They're involved in everything.
Yes.
So we see that the moral fabric of our community is going down.
Yes, it is.
You know, it's falling apart. And it has been doing this, like I said, for many years.
Yes.
It hasn't just started. And listen, something that I admire about, you know, communities that stick together, they do not separate themselves from the majority of who their people are.
No, they don't.
See, listen, this is a simple principle. I'm going to give you this. This is a simple principle that we need to learn in the African American community. Okay? Because every other community practices this. So let me give you an example. If you have let's just say NBA draft is coming up, okay? In the NBA, the worst team gets the first pick of the best player that's coming out of college. Why does the worst team get the best pick of the player coming out of the college, Janet?
Because they want a better team.
Because
they want a chance to be better.
Because they want that team to be competitive with all the other teams in the league.
Yes.
If they bring that team up,
it
makes a better product to sell to the general public.
Yes.
Okay? Everybody wants their team to win. So they start at the bottom. They start with the team that is the worst. the lowest, and they say, okay, you get the best pick this year. And then you get the trade for other top picks. But you're going to get the best the first round pick. If we did that, if we take the lowest of our community and we said, we're going to make you better. Everybody invest in our community coming up, and you got to start at the bottom. If you start with the lowest and you bring them up, you make the whole community better. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
That's why I say it's in best interest. See, if we had real, y'all know I get on black politicians, but if we had a real black caucus and not the black Caucasians, okay, they would understand why it is so important to invest in those people groups that they say are in poverty and below poverty. And not only that, they would understand why it is so important to push the president to commit to a reparations package.
For African Americans.
Yes. If you can empower the lowest in the nation, you're going to make the whole nation better if you bring them out. You understand what I'm saying? So you're talking about immediately having an effect on crime if you bring the lowest up. Immediately having an effect on education if you bring the lowest up. Immediately having an effect on crime in the prison system if you bring the lowest up. You understand what I'm saying? So we have, as an African American community, we can't depend on other people to do that. It's been proven over and over that the government is not going to do that, right?
Right.
Welfare is not a vehicle to prosper you. Welfare is a system that is put in place to make you become so codependent that you will not rise above that. Okay? So, it's up to us to say that with the welfare system, let us teach you to invest in ourselves and to teach those that may be in the system how to come out of the system and to support themselves.
Yes.
And if we have to put resources behind that to help them.
I get it.
You understand? We bring each other up. So, there's an old saying that, every tide lifts the boat, right? So if we're doing that as a community, then we lift the boat together.
You know what?
So,
no, we got a lot of selfish people in this world. A lot of selfish people. They're all about themselves and their little few and no more. And their thing, I must admit, I have friends like that say that, and I don't agree because I believe in helping. I've always been that way. And they say they ought to help themselves. Well, they can't help themselves if they've never been given the tools to help themselves. If you don't do anything but educate them, spend a little time with them, showing them, telling them. I'm not saying give them, even the Bible says, Jesus said, you show a man how to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. You feed a man fish, he'll only eat for what? They say that day, or I say that time, at that one feeding. So we have to be consistently involved. If you don't take but one family or one person and work with that person, and you can't say, well, they don't want to work with me. There's somebody out there that will listen, that that I know, that we know will listen, that want to get better, want to do better. We know because we talk to those people. We work with those people. We have
to teach those people. So we share information with those people that lifts them. And to the point to where I make appointments and have people to come over to the house to show them how to lift themselves up.
Exactly.
So that is an investment that we make in ourselves to help our people. So we're not so selfish that the information that we have, things that we may possess, we cannot use to lift our people.
Exactly.
If you are blessed to have things, information, knowledge,
yes.
wisdom, whatever it may
that.
be, you can create a business to help your people.
That's it, right. And I say this, in our women of season, older women, not old, older. If you're around younger women, maybe you work with them. I do. That you can foster, help them, show them, be an example to those young women. Let them see that in you, and they're going to inquire. I know they do me. Miss Janice, how did you get that? How do you do that? Help me to understand why you do that. If we do that consciously, with effort and zeal, and show them that you care, they will get it. And then they will take it and pass it along to their group.
At one time, we did that without mentorship programs. Listen, I've said this and I'm going to keep saying it until somebody figure this out. Grant programs, mentorship programs, they have their place. But do they make a dent or an impact in the overall dynamics of what we deal with in our community as it relates to crime, education? No, they make a very little small ripple in the big pond. Okay, why? Because it was, when you go back and you look at the origin and the creation of programs, when you look at how this country was set up, programs were in place for one reason and one reason only. That was to keep the wealthy wealthy and to be able to pass the breadcrumbs to the peasants without giving them a portion, without allowing them to advance in the society to the place to where they will consider themselves equal. Okay. So listen, the wealthy, elitist groups in this country have never wanted those that exist in poverty and that are poor to climb out of that caste system.
Well, Brian, Jesus said that the poor will always be what?
But the reason that Jesus said that was because he was wise enough to see the greed in people. That was not a statement that was made to say that the poor is always with you because that's just the way it is. It was a statement that was made when you look at the Greek text. It was a statement that was made because he was wise enough to recognize that the greed of humanity
would always be among you.
Will always be used to oppress people. So you have to understand, we make frivolous statements like that and don't know what the Bible really says. And that's I'll get on that soapbox when I do a show on pastors. Okay. But that is the meaning of that statement. Okay. Not because poor people have always been, no, because humanity makes each other poor. Greed makes each other poor. The system that we exist under now, called capitalism, though it has done its good points, and have made a lot of people wealthy. By those people getting wealthy, it has also created a vacuum that the poor cannot come out of. Okay, it's created a vortex that the poor in poverty exist in. Okay, regardless of how much they say that capitalism gives everybody the same equal chance, it does not. So we have to deal with that, and we have to keep discussing it and keep talking about solutions as it relates to these issues. So we'll end on this note. It's about 8:15. Assimilation, by definition, always takes place according to the larger societal white model of culture and behavior. And thus the Negro must give up much of his black identity and subculture to be comfortably integrated. Many Negroes who seek complete assimilation become preoccupied with proving themselves to white people and trying to show them that we are just like all other human beings. That is, that they are really not a Negro. And I'll end on that note.
Okay. Okay, we thank you guys for joining us today, and I just want to encourage you to each one, reach one, teach one. You know, find somebody that you feel comfortable with, that feels comfortable with you, that is willing to allow you to invest into them, be it knowledge, be it whatever, as long as it's good and you mean well by it. It comes from the heart and it's good, it's good. Thank you for joining us and have a wonderful rest of your Sunday.
We will see you next week. Bye-bye.